when we think about mouth position, where do I put my tongue? What do I do with my lips? We get really focused on the technical
Hmm.
aspects. We miss the actual sound. And what we see with English, English is, I think, very forgiving. If you make a mistake, technically, you can still achieve a very natural sound. There's more than one possible way to produce the sounds that you hear in English. And if we only focus on a single way, we can lose sight of that. We can not realize that there are other alternatives that might actually assist our pronunciation a little bit more. So I think this, in some ways, is less stressful. I don't have to remember, oh, I need to put my tongue here. I need to do this. I need to do this.
Hmm.
It's just like, oh, how can I get more airflow through? That oftentimes, just solving that is oftentimes enough to achieve a more natural sound.
Yeah, that's such an important point. I think that's also why Yen and I feel so lucky that we found you, because there's so much English learning materials out there,
Mm-hmm. It's true.
but it's very rare that people talk about placement breath in at least in Mandarin. It's very hard for us to find even reference materials when we were preparing our lessons. It
That's across languages, by the way. Like in Italian, you're not going to find much content related to placement. If you're learning Spanish, you're not going to find concepts related to placement. It's important across the language, but there's just not a lot of mention of it.
Mhm.
Or if there is mention, it's like a page in a textbook.
Yeah. And even if you get the technical stuff perfect, you still can sound very unnatural if you're not
It's
aware of some of the other stuff that are just like instincts to native speakers.
to give an example. Like imagine if I talked like this the entire time. Like this is me talking with a higher placement, and it's
Hmm.
when you hear me talking lower, it's different. Versus, this is a more natural placement for me,
Yeah.
and it's an immediate change. And you, if you're watching this or listening to this, you can probably hear that. And this is the effect of placement. I didn't change anything mouth position wise. The only thing I changed was where I'm projecting from. And you could probably understand me okay with the higher placement, but you could also tell that the sound was of a very different quality.
Yeah. So much more resonance
Mm.
when you lower the placement.
Right. I know we spend a lot of time talking about sentence level things like stress pattern, pitch changes, thought groups. If you're curious about specific sounds like vowels, like the difference between sit and seat or lock and luck, those should all sound different. Are you pronouncing them differently? Well, Elsa is an app that you'll want to try because I think it does a really good job at finding those little tiny details of pronunciation, and you can try it for free. And you can even take a test for free to figure out where your specific weaknesses are. And it can give you a chance to start working right now.
A second question I want to hear your thoughts on, Jeff, is actually a debate I had with some friends in real life as
I like
immigrants
debates.
who live in the U.S. A lot of us, not a lot, maybe I shouldn't say that, but some of us think having an accent means that you speak at least two languages. You should, you know, it's something you should be proud of. You should not reduce your accent trying to hide who you are. As long as you can be understood, that's fine. You let the native speakers do the work. So there was a point when I was actually ashamed and a tiny bit scared to tell my friends that I'm trying to reduce my accent, learning pronunciation stuff. Um, and I know you personally don't really like the word accent reduction because it kind of insinuates on there's accents who are better than others. Do you want to maybe speak to a little bit of this kind of the dilemma of trying to improve yourself, but also don't want to lose who you are?
And we're not trying to make you lose who you are, to be clear. I don't usually refer to it as accent reduction. There's a study that I was reading talking about the language that we use to refer to this process of pronunciation and instruction.
Mhm.
And the study basically concluded there is no great answer, but a better alternative potentially could be, instead of accent reduction, accent expansion, because that's really what we're doing. We are giving you another tool. We're not taking away a tool you have. If you want to go back to a very if you want to go back to a pronunciation that's very heavily influenced by your first language, you can. Tina, if you wanted to sound a lot more Mandarin when you talk, You could. You would know what to exaggerate and things like that, right?
Yeah.
So,
I
but
can
you
do
also
a Northeastern Mandarin English accent.
let's go, Harbin. Come on. uh, but you can also not choose not to. And so what we're doing is we're not taking away anything. We're adding to what you already know. You can always go back to what you're doing. We're not saying that you can't. We I think we're also, how do I put this? It's a similar debate, the things that you talk about when, for instance, my brother tells his friends what I do for a living, and they're like, "This Jeff guy, he's horrible. He wants to change how people talk. He thinks people have a problem." And I think that that sort of answer often comes from people that haven't spent a lot of time learning a second language, because I think the reality is when you learn a second language, no matter what position you take right now, at some point you've probably had that moment where you're like, I want to sound more like the natives around me, or I want to sound more like the natives I see in the media, or things like that. And maybe you don't necessarily feel that way right now, but that is a very common thought process that
Mhm.
comes in the language learning journey. I had it with Italian, um, and I imagine that that's a familiar feeling for people here as well. And
Yeah,
so, go on.
I love the word accent expansion. Like expand who you are instead of
It's way more
thinking of it as
positive.
taking things away from you. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. We're adding. We're not taking away, right? And so, I think we need to understand that the way we talk, there's a lot of intentionality behind it, and just be honest about that. If you are someone that has an accent and you're like, I like my accent, it's a badge of honor to show where I'm from, great. I'm glad you've arrived at that moment of comfort. I want everyone to arrive at a moment of comfort. If you're also a person that has missed out on promotions, that didn't land a job opportunity, that got comments or maybe even picked on in school, that has had a negative interaction with people based entirely on the way that you
Mhm.
say words and on nothing else. That's what I want to help people with. If you're comfortable,
Mhm.
then don't look at these videos. Good. You're where you need to be. I'm happy for you. But if you are someone that's like, "Hey, I think the way I'm interacting with people is being negatively impacted by the way I talk and I want to change that," then I can show you the tools you want to consider to make that change happen.
Yeah, that's such an important point. Even if it's not like a really big thing, a promotion you missed out on, getting bullied, even if it's just daily interactions with people, how friendly I want people to find me,
Hmm.
I want to have that come across the way I intended it to be. And I don't see myself communicating. I don't see the main purpose to every every time I open my mouth to be, I'm Chinese, I'm proud that I'm Chinese. The maybe most important thing for me is to be understood what I wanted to say at the moment and to not have assumptions. Or as we always make assumptions, everybody makes
Right.
assumptions, and it's so much harder with an accent what people can assume.